Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at two different pairs of shears. And we're going to see which one's sharper. We have a really neat way of testing that. So, digging into these, one made by Klein, one put out by Crescent, with the WIS name on it. Both claim to have a titanium coating on them. Both are spring loaded, and you can kind of see how they do that. And both have a lock, both have the same thin handle. The Klein is made in China. They both have the molded grip thing going on and everything, and the WIS Crescent, also made in China. Let's crack these open and start comparing. Okay, we got both of these out and we're taking a closer look, and I believe the length of your cutting surface is pretty comparable between the two. It's both right around 2 inch. The thickness of the handles, about 7/8 on that one, and right around 7/8 on that one, so they're all pretty comparable. Overall length from the center of the pivot to the rear of the handles is 5 on the Klein and 5 on the Crescent. They're both pretty comparable in every way. They both have adjustable joints, so if they start feeling a little sloppy, you can tighten them up a little bit. Looks like Klein uses a nylock and the Crescent uses more of a flange. I'm wondering if that's a serrated flange in there. Let's open them up. I can't really see how far the metal goes into the handle on the Crescent, though the Crescent doesn't feel too bad. The Klein, we can't really see how far it goes either, although it looks like probably right about here. This moves that way, so I'm not sure. Both open up unreasonably large. They have a decent feel to them. They have the classic kind of tin snip thing there to hold your fingers, both of them. The WIS feel a little bit, or the Crescent feels a little bit smoother. The finish is definitely more blue on the Klein than it is on the Crescent. I don't know if we can see that. Maybe we'll take a look under the microscope, see how it shows up. But that's a pretty basic first look at them. Now we can go ahead and check the Shure A durometer of both of the rubber grips on these. And our Klein, we'll have to test this at a few spots and get an average. 82.5, 82, 82.5. So they're right in that. Got to get on the high spot here. Yeah, I might not got it that well. So they're probably right in that 82 point something range there. How about the Crescent? Gotta try and make sure I'm on a high spot with this because it will skew the measurement. So we're right around the 70 to 75 range. There's a 77, 74. I'll call it 75. So I think we're going to go ahead and say the rubber on the Klein is a little bit harder than the rubber on the WIS, and I can definitely feel that this is a little bit more, shall we say, gummy than the handles on the Klein. And really what that means is the Klein rubber might hold up a little bit better, but the Crescent is going to have a little bit better stiction in your hand. Time would tell on both of these if one is better than the other, but I will say this feels gummier than this, and if you're going to kind of throw these around and beat them up, that might be a considering factor. Now we can also check the Shure D durometer of the plastic and see how hard the plastic is on each of these. We'll go to a high spot again. About 64, 67, 68. So probably in that 66 to 67 range on the Klein for the plastic. Let's get into the Crescent. 74, so it's a little harder. 76, 74, so probably around a 75. So plastic seems to be a little harder on the Crescent, rubber seems to be a little harder on the Klein. Kind of an interesting result. Okay, so if you bought one of these two, how much extra weight would you be lugging around every day in your tool carry? Let's take a look here. 7.0605 ounces for the Crescent and 6.47 for the Klein. So the Klein's lighter, which is kind of nice. Carrying around less weight is a nice thing. Next up, we're going to go ahead and take a look under the microscope and see how these look. Get that into focus. And there you can see the grinding on the Crescent. Actually looks pretty nice. You can see a blemish in that edge already. And you can see that the edges are kind of serrated on the other side. So it appears as though we have a serration on one side. There you can see it. And the other side is straight, and there's that blemish right here. You can see it. But overall, the grind looks somewhat decent. There's your tip. Not a pointed tip. And then if we close it, how does it look with it closed? It doesn't look bad. It doesn't feel bad. I don't have a backlight behind it, but it does look like it's closing all the way. There's your titanium coated laser etching. There's your handle, your Crescent. There's your pivot, the lock, and all the lock does is move in and out and lock the piece from moving all together. There's the texture on the handles. You can see it's that kind of, would you call that a pleated type of texture? Take a look at the black part of the handle, and then here's that, what I think is a serrated nut. I don't think there's nylon in that. I think it's just serrated. Now, to compare the two, see if I can get them both under the microscope. You can see the color temperature is different between the two. The Klein is definitely darker. So let's go ahead and open the Klein up. Has a flat cutting surface here, and it also takes advantage of a serration on one side. So there's your serrated side. Again, the point, it's not a sharp point. Let's flip that over. Here's the inside of the serrated side. Pretty nice grinding again on this. Klein has made scissors for a long time, so I would expect them to have a little bit better quality. Even though this is made in China, they should have a little bit better proprietary knowledge. There's your nylock and your friction washer, where the Crescent, I believe, is relying just on that serrated nut. This has an actual nylock and a friction washer to load that joint. So I think that's a little bit better. Here's the inside of that fastener. Here is your titanium coated laser etching on this tool, and the inside of those serrations again. I think cutter wise, I think I like the looks of the Klein a little better. There's your lock. It's kind of hard to say. I think that just pushes down behind this and keeps it from opening. There's your rubber on this. They've got grooves in it to give you some grip on one side, and the other side they just went smooth with it. There's your branding in the plastic. Not too bad. The plastic structure looks about the same on each. I don't really know enough about polymers to weigh in on that one way or the other. We can test the hardness, and that's where we're going to leave that. But there's our look under the microscope of each. Alright, so I said we had a nice fun way of checking how sharp these are, and I don't think I was kidding. We have here a BESS C, as in the letter C, sharpness scale. And what this is going to do is there is a piece of material in here that breaks at a specific force, and you can see it's pretty sensitive. It's measuring grams. I can make the scale work that way, and then it obviously holds how much force it took. But we're going to test both of these, and since we have a serrated edge and a non-serrated edge, we're going to test both. Okay, so we're just going to come in and we're going to push down on this piece until it breaks, just like that. And a 696 is not overly crazy sharp, but that's our non-serrated edge. We had a 696. Let me reset, and we will test the non-serrated edge on the Klein. So now we'll take our non-serrated edge and get in here and push down. Quite a bit more for the non-serrated edge. Now I have to test these near the tip, because of if I have this open too far, I can't get inside here to push down. I can skew the number if I do that. So I gotta have it mostly closed in there. But the Crescent was quite a bit sharper than the Klein there. Alright, now that we've got that, let's go to our serrated edge testing, because in my mind it makes sense that the two might be a little different. Let's hook in here. So we are right around 1500 for our serrated edge on the Crescent, which is a bit higher than what the Klein saw. So I'm really interested to see how sharp the serrated edge is on the Klein. Alright, so now we have our serrated edge on the Klein, and let's see what we get with it. $875. So that's really interesting. The serrated edge on this is almost twice as sharp as the serrated edge on this, and the straight edge on this is half as sharp as the straight edge on this. That's really fascinating. What it means in the grand scheme of things, not sure, but there we go. Okay, so we're over at the load cell vise, and I think what we're going to do now is we're going to see how hard the springs push back on these. And what we're going to do that is we're just going to put this in the load cell vise, and we're going to center it up that it's at the load cell, and we're just going to squeeze this. Now this is about where I would like to test it for the next test. So we'll see how much force it takes to close these. Now this is going to get harder as we go in. We're going to go to full close on the tips here. And right there. So about 2.7, I can just squeeze it closed a little bit more and get it out of the handle. So now I screwed up how it was sitting in there. But we were right about 2.7 there with our spring tension. So about 2.7, whatever unit of measure this is, but we'll compare the two so it'll be even. So that's about how hard that was to squeeze. Now we'll back this off again and put the Klein in, and we'll see how high the Klein gets. So the Klein, we're going to do the exact same thing. Put it right here in the jaws, and we're about halfway here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and leave that just the way it is, and we're going to run this in and see how much the handle says here. So we're averaging, turning about the same speed. So we got to a little bit more spring pressure, not significantly higher, and right there should be closed. So we got to 3, and I can squeeze that closed again and get it out. So minor amount of spring tension more on the Klein. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut a tie wrap with these. I'm thinking if I go to middle of travel, since the springs are about the same on each of these, we should have a relatively fair showing of how much force it takes to cut a tie wrap. And then we're going to look at how the tie wrap looks in the microscope to see how well it cut through that tie wrap. Okay, so we are about halfway open on the jaw. We could take a measurement and try and make sure we're about as fair as we could be here. You'll notice about halfway here we don't have. So what I want to do is hold that. So okay, so the tie wrap will have 1 inch on the other side of it. That seems like a decent spot to cut. So we're just going to hold this tie wrap and we're going to cut it. Look at how much force we have. 4, 4.5, 6, 5. So we saw about 5.3. Feels like the tie wrap might be yielding. We are definitely cutting through the tie wrap. We didn't shear it. Okay, there we go. We're through the tie wrap. So we had 5.3 was the highest for the Crescent. pretty close. So we got this about to where it needs to be, and I'm going to try and hold that as perpendicular as I can, and we're going to see now how much force it takes to cut through this tie wrap. I can hear it going through the tie wrap. We didn't get to 5 yet, and we're definitely cutting through it. There's 5. We kind of just briefly hit it, and we are through. It's yielding. There we go, we're through. So that will be the Klein, and that will be the Crescent. So the Klein just barely hit 5, where the Crescent went a little higher. So they're still pretty close here. Next we're going to take a look at the microscope and see how these cuts look and which one's going through cleaner. Okay, we are back from the load cell vise. And now what we're going to do is take a look at these cuts and see if one of them looks better than the other, or if they're about the same. If you recall, we had a little bit less force on the Klein cutting through than we did on the Crescent. So diving into the Crescent, you can see here that is a pretty clean cut on that piece. We look at the end section of it, you can see where it's sheared through. It's pretty nice and clean. Let's take a look at the cutoff piece. End section. A little bit of discoloration in there, the way it looks. See how that's a little bit white? And we had some ripping right at the very end. There you go, you can see that discoloration. I don't know if we had discoloration in the original, just a little bit at the very end. So that's showing some stress in the plastic and it not getting cut perfectly. I don't know if that's gonna matter or not, but we'll see if the Klein has the same. There you can kind of see the serrations from the cutter, so you can tell which side the serration end was. Both of these have the serrations on the bottom shear. We don't have a lot of peening over if we catch the glare in the light, which was something that we saw with some of the more dull flush cutters. Let's check the other side here. Kind of make out those serrations. Not a whole lot of peening over at all. So that is our Crescent. Now let's get to the Klein. And we'll take a look at our top piece. A little bit of peening over. You see how it's got a little bit of a point at the end. A little bit of a point. We don't have stress from white from discoloring. It appears as though it pulled right through. There you can kind of make out the serrations a little bit, but that is pretty clean going through. I think on that piece, I don't know, let's see what the cutoff looks like and see if we have any discoloration. So really no discoloration to speak of. That's a little bit of a reflection. Maybe just a hair. No, I don't think so. Really no discoloration here. You can see the ends are mushed out a little bit though, where we did not see that, I don't think, as much on the Crescent. A little bit. See right there on that edge, it's mushed out. So while the Crescent has discoloration, there you can see it, the Klein has the mushing out. Klein did take less force, but you can see it's kind of pinching it. There you go. It's pinching it down to that point, and it's mushing out because of where it pinched down to. Whereas the Crescent, it doesn't look very pinched. So I have a feeling that's what we're seeing, is that non-serrated blade being not as sharp on the Klein. So that's, I kind of like that, because that backs up what we saw on the best C scale, that the non-serrated blade was not as sharp on the Klein, and what you have, you can see it here, you have more pinching on the Klein than you do on the Crescent, and I think that's the difference. So, very fascinating. Something else we could check here is our overall length. For the Klein, we're right at 7.5, and for the Crescent, we are right at 7.5. Your handle full width is 2 3/4 on the Crescent and 2 3/4 on the Klein. So these really have pretty similar specs all the way through. So there we have it. We played around a little bit with these two shears, and we did a basic test with a tie wrap. Now I know some people might want to see us cut something a little bit more aggressive or something like that, but in reality the tie wrap is a very good test, because you can see what a cutter is doing. We saw how it mushed out the cutter on the, or the plastic of the tie wrap on the Klein, but we didn't see it really mush out the plastic on the tie wrap with the Crescent. So I think that's really interesting to compare the two. I'll be interested to do this test on some other shears moving forward, just to see what we get as far as force applied in the load cell vise and how the tie wraps look. We had discoloration on the tie wraps here, which I'm thinking is a sign of stress, but if somebody knows a little bit better than me, let me know in the comments below if the white marking in this tie wrap is the sign of a sharp cutter or a duller cutter. I'm thinking in my mind that I'd be putting more force in it, ripping it apart, which creates that discoloration. Maybe that's a sign of it being really sharp. I don't think we saw a lot of discoloration on the tie wraps when we did the flush cutters. We saw more of this squishing out with the duller ones. So I think that's, while we could get into cutting vinyl siding or thin sheet metal, all of these things they're rated for, leather, vinyl of any kind, these are rated to cut some stuff, just not, it's not a replacement for your tin snips, but these are meant to cut some things, and they're sharp, don't get me wrong, they're quite sharp. It's not like you can take something and just, it won't cut through it, it'll bend it in between the blades. These will both cut quite a bit, but I'm trying to come up with a way that we can look at it and see, okay, which one's better. And I think from this testing at this time, it seems like the Crescent is sharper than the Klein. Now, could you sharpen the Klein and get it sharper? Absolutely. This is right out of the box. We're doing out of the box testing. Let's face it, most of us are going to buy this, throw it in the tool carry, and send it. We're not going to mess around with sharpening it or making it any better. So we're just doing out of the box testing to compare how it looks. I think from what I'm seeing, the Crescent is going to be a little sharper, though the Klein didn't take as much force. According to the load cell vise, it was really close though. So I would say that was probably within the factor of screw up there. I would say they both probably required a similar amount of force. We saw the springs were relatively equal between the two through distance of travel and everything else. In fact, the difference may have been just that difference in spring tension, but they're very similar. So I think for this particular round, I think I would go with the Crescent for your compact shear that you can throw in your tool carry and have something that will do stuff. I mean, I think these would be great for cutting labels. If you're printing a lot of labels and putting them on stuff, wires, term blocks, that sort of stuff. You know how that can go. You print a bunch and then there's always that break that you didn't make it in. You got to cut them. I think either of these would be just fine for that sort of thing. Basically anything that you need a scissors for out on the job site. Either of them would be a very good basic pair of scissors that you can use to cut stuff. And the way the handles are made and everything else on both of them, they both will work out very well. Something I don't know if I like about the Crescent that I see here, these handles touch. Now, the handles touch after the cutter has gone beyond the travel of the cutter. So right where the cutter meets at the tip, the handles are open that much. But that might be something as these wear, it may or may not get worse. I do not know. Something the Klein has in its favor is the handles are nice and far away from each other. When the handle or the shear is all the way closed, you aren't gonna, so you might get a little bit more purchase with the Klein when you go to use it. That's just an observation. I don't know that it would really sour me on one way or the other, but generally I don't like it when handles touch on tools. It's kind of, to me, a sign of cheapness. If the handles are touching, you only have what you have, you can't adjust anything, or you don't have any play for wear. We're talking a set of shears here, but it's the idea of it. I generally don't like it when the backs of handles touch on a tool. Not a deal breaker at all, but an observation. If it's something for one of you guys, you know, you might get yourself pinched in there a little easier. Here, I can have that finger in there and we're through everything. Here, you're not getting that in. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think we went through a few things to try and look at on these to just see. Now, I think one more thing we could try is how hard is the titanium coating on these. That might be a fun experiment to try. So I don't know what to expect here, so I'm going to guess a 60. We're just going to do a scrape here. We've got some resistance. Now, I don't know. I still have resistance. Let's go here. I feel like I have some drag yet on a 50. This is a really hard one to judge. There's the way this is machined. I think I'm digging into the coating finish. That's interesting. Let's see on the Crescent if it's the same. It is. This is really hard to judge. That feels like it's kind of skating, kind of like it did on the Klein. That feels like it's skating as well. Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit, this is machined a little differently. I think I'm getting a little more accurate representation here. Yeah, this is pretty hard on the surface. Yeah, that definitely dug in. So that's between a 60 and a 65. Let's see if we can get an area on this that gives us the same feeling. So I definitely dug in with the 65. Yeah, we're getting about the same. The 60 is sort of making a mark. So they're both around the same hardness, between a 60 and a 65, which I guess makes sense if it's titanium coated, both of them. So there we have it. I think this was kind of a fun play around video to look at some shears and to see, just compare. This is kind of a new thing that came out, a shear of this format, and I kind of wanted to see which one was more worthwhile. Both of these are right at that $20 range, and I think you kind of get equal bang for your buck out of both of them, though I think the Crescent, cutter wise, is a wee bit better than what we see on the Klein, but this is sample size of 1, so kind of take that for what you will. But I'm kind of happy to see that the results we got were kind of backed up by what we saw on the scale. The straight shear is the one that's going to do most of the cutting in the case of this tie wrap, and we have a cleaner cut on the Crescent than we do on the Klein. Now we saw the serrated part of the shear was sharper on the Klein, but the straight side of the shear was more dull, and we had that peening over. So I think we're on to something with our testing rigs. We kind of have all of that stuff equaled out and kind of making sense. So I'm happy with that. Just playing around in the shop. Let me know what you guys think. Do you have one or both or either? Have you destroyed one or both? What is your experience with them? Do you think one is better than the other? I am testing kind of like right as close to the middle of the shear as I can get, which should be your ideal. I know all the way back is your best, but we tried to do everything equal, and this may not age as well as this. That happens sometimes as well. This is all, take it for what it's worth, right out of the package. This is what they do. So as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.